country. So straight away, let's begin with a developing story in Nakuru County, where Nakuru High Court is this morning expected to sentence Jane Muthoni, the teacher and former headmistress convicted of murdering her school principal husband, hiring 3 men to kill him and hang him from a tree. Now, the court found Muthoni guilty of murdering her husband, Solomon Mwangi, the principal of Kiru Boys High School, between November 6th and 11th in 2016. The mother of 3 is the former headmistress of Icaciri Secondary School in Kiambu. Also convicted was one of the 3 men, Isaac Nganga, alias Gikuyu. Ibrahim Karanja is following this for us and now joins us live with an update. Ibrahim Karanja, this is a story that captured the attention of the country as details of the murder came to the fore.
Yes, Brenda, good morning. Indeed, this is a case that captured the attention of the country, given the circumstances and when this particular murder was discovered. Remember, on the 7th of November 2016, the principal of Kiru Boys High School, Solomon Mwangi, did not turn up at the Moranga Education Officer's office to pick the KCSE exams papers like was required by that time. Remember, principals have been going to pick KCSE exams and delivering the papers at exam centers. And that morning, on November 7th, 2016, Solomon Mwangi, the principal at Kiru Boys, did not turn up. And his absence sort of raised concerns across the country. Days later, on 14th of November 2016, his body was found somewhere in Juja at Karakuta Coffee Estate, having been tied on a tree, actually. And what came out later in the case is that he was murdered, and following that particular discovery of the body, several people were arrested, and among the people who were arrested was Jane Muthoni, who was the wife of Solomon Mwangi at that particular time, and she was the principal at Icaciri Girls Secondary School in Gatondo, Kiambu. So today, that particular case closes as Justice Professor Joel Ngugi sentences 2 suspects, that is Jane Muthoni, the wife, and Isaac Nganga, alias Gikuyu, the co-accused, who were found guilty several weeks ago of the murder of this particular principal. So we want to break down, we want to understand what exactly brought the judge to this conclusion that the 2 were found guilty. There are an array of reasons, including phone data, including contacts between Mbuthi and the suspects. There is also another confession from a 3rd person who was accused in this particular murder. That was Joseph Karaoke, alias Kariz, and this is a person who confessed to have taken part in the murder, and his charges were reduced from murder to manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison as long as he agreed to be a state witness. And the statement that he gave in court is what actually you can say was the last nail on the coffin in this particular case and against Jane Muthoni and Isaac Nganga. Let me bring in Julius Chepkwony, who is a reporter with the Standard Group and has been on this case for the longest time, to give us the details of this particular case. Julius, thank you so much for speaking to us. This is a case you have followed for so long, and before Justice Professor Joel Ngugi found these 2 guilty of the murder of Solomon Mwangi, there were several witnesses who appeared. Perhaps you can take us through the journey as the case was being heard.
Yes, but concerning the number of witnesses that testified in the case had 21 witnesses who managed to testify, and after the prosecution closed its case, using the testimonies that were availed by the 21 witnesses, the 2, that is Jane Muthoni, who was the wife and the former Icaciri Girls principal, and Isaac Nganga, alias Gikuyu, were found guilty of the murder of Solomon Mwangi. And in that case, the 2 actually from the judgment that was read or presented by Justice Joel Ngugi in April 22nd indicated that Jane Muthoni was the mastermind of the killings of her husband, and in that case, the court noted that he was the person behind all the plans, including and he engaged several people, among them Gikoyo, that is Isaac Nganga, and we have someone by the name of Nelson Njiru, who has since been described in this case as a fugitive. He has never been traced. He went missing after the murder, and to date, even as the court delivers its verdict or sentence the two, it is the whereabouts of Nelson Njiru is not known. So as it is, from what was analyzed and what was presented in court, the court relied on some evidence, including a pair of sport shoes that was, Nganga was found in possession with, and this pair of shoes were owned by the late Solomon Mwangi. And from the testimony that was presented by a person or someone who sold this pair of shoes to the late principal, he came to court and identified. He even stated to the court that I sold this pair of shoes to Solomon Mwangi, the principal, the deceased principal, and after some days he told me the first pair of shoes was size 9, but the principal said that it was not fit for, it was not fitting him. So the size had to be changed, and he got another number 10, that is size 10. So, and then there are also details of phone data that were analyzed, and text messages and phone calls that the court relied on, both from Safaricom and Telcom.
Julius, and looking at the judgment, the Justice Professor Joel Ngugi actually used the word that the principal, Jane Muthoni, principally instigated the murder. And looking at what the witnesses testified, this is something that might have been hatched from as early as the beginning of 2016. And it brings to the fore the involvement of an M-Pesa lady who was to be killed in this particular case. Is it something you want to bring to light?
I would say that the plan initially from the script and was to have the M-Pesa lady, who has since been mentioned as MWK in that judgment. Her name was not revealed, and it was indicated that she was the target. But later, the masterminds or the planners of the killings could not eliminate her. It is stated that the location of the M-Pesa was not, they could not carry out the murder, or they could not get rid of the lady. And that is when they decided to go for the husband or the late principal. There are indications that the location of the M-Pesa was somewhere near a police station. There were CCTVs, and so it became difficult to execute the killing.
It became difficult to execute the killing of the M-Pesa lady, and thus they turned their gun to the principal. And eventually, detectives and those who are prosecuting this case were able to place Jane Muthoni at the scene of the murder. I remember reading the judgment, and it was said that Jane was actually inside the car that the principal was killed in. The principal was intoxicated, that is Solomon Mwangi. And according to statements from Joseph, who was already sentenced, the principal actually witnessed as the husband was being murdered. So where did that place Joseph to even actually bring him to have the 7 years sentence, which he's currently serving? I think he's done 4 years right now.
From the phone data and the details that were analyzed and presented in court, it indicated that there were communication between the three convicts, or the two, that is Muthoni. We had Muthoni, we had Nganga, we had Njiru, and then we had Karaoke. And from the details that were analyzed, it placed the four actually. It never eliminated or left anyone out, but all the four to the scene of the murder, where the body was found in a coffee plantation actually placed in a gunny bag.
And finally, even in their final submissions, there was an interesting request from Jane Muthoni, the principal, on what she needed. This is something you also followed up in court. You may want to bring our viewers up to speed.
Yes, from the sentence hearing that was done on May 18th, and the submissions that were made by, actually it was a mitigation kind of submissions by all the parties, including Jane Muthoni's daughter, June Muthoni, who appeared in a Zoom sentence hearing and told the court that, yes, we need justice for our deceased father. He loved us and we loved him. He was our good friend, but our mother is guilty. So she was pleading for the court to be lenient on sentencing the mother. And shockingly, and from what the prosecution or the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution was saying, that Jane was never remorseful and they wanted her sentenced to death. But from what, because I was following up the proceedings, is that Jane maintained her innocence and actually pleaded with the court later that her phone and other items or documents be released to her. Yes.
Thank you so much, Julius Chepkwony. Well, Julius Chepkwony is a Standard Group reporter who has been on this case for the longest time, and you've seen him giving us the meat of this particular story. Yes, Nelson, or rather the principal of Icaciri Boys High School, that is Mwangi Mbuthi, was murdered between 6th and 14th, according to what was presented in court. And the wife, Jane Muthoni, was later arrested with 3 other suspects. Just to bring you to understand as to why only 2 suspects are left today, that is the principal suspect, Jane Muthoni, and Isaac Nganga. There were actually 4 suspects in this particular case. There was a Nelson Njiru, who to date remains at large. He has been described as a fugitive. Then there was a Joseph Kariuki, Elias Kariz, who was arrested for this particular murder, but confessed to have taken part in the murder and agreed to be a state witness. And after agreeing to be a state witness, his charges were reduced from murder to manslaughter, and he was sentenced to 7 years in prison. To date, he has served about 4 years, and he is the one who confessed in court, and his statement actually sort of, you can say, was the last nail on the coffin for Jane Muthoni and Isaac Nganga, because he said himself that, yes, we were hired to kill the principal. Initially, we were hired to kill an M-Pesa lady. It proved difficult to kill the M-Pesa lady because she was near a police station and there were CCTVs all over. So our plan was changed from killing the M-Pesa lady to killing the high school principal, given that it was suspected that the 2 were involved in a relationship. That was what came out in this particular case. So today is the last day, even as Justice Professor Joel Ngugi sentences the 2. It is interesting to see how this particular sentence will come out. But yes, also the thing that Julius has mentioned about phone communication between the suspects, right from early 2016 up to the time these particular murders were done, also played a very key role in pinning down the suspects. And lastly, there is that pair of shoes which the deceased was wearing at that particular time, and which was found to be, or one of the suspects was found to be in possession of. So yes, this is something we are looking at. The sentencing should be happening in the next few minutes. Even as it happens, be sure to find it right from KTN News. A case that started in 2016 November, now coming to a conclusion on the 3rd of June 2021. Not really a conclusion, because one more suspect is still at large, that is Nelson Njiru. But one can say that for the family of the principal, this might actually be at that time where justice is being finally served. Brenda.
Yes, indeed, Ibrahim Karanja, justice is being served 5 years later, and definitely we'll give you that live coverage through my colleague Ibrahim Karanja once that ruling begins. But still within the corridors of justice, the Court of Appeal has fixed June 29th to July 2nd as the hearing dates for the